Alright, let's dive right into our first topic. Understanding the fundamental relationship between climate change and agriculture. This is a critical issue because climate change has a direct impact on agricultural productivity and consequently our food security. Now, you might be wondering, how does climate change influence agriculture? Let's break it down. Agriculture is heavily dependent on the climate. The growth and development of crops and the health and well-being of livestock both hinge on specific weather conditions. Changes in these conditions, such as shifts in temperature and precipitation patterns, can have significant impacts. Let's talk about crops first. Most of our staple crops, such as wheat, rice, and maize, have a specific temperature range within which they grow best. When average temperatures move out of this range, either becoming too hot or too cold, crop yields can decrease. For example, imagine a hot summer day. Now imagine that heat intensified and prolonged. Crops can't simply take off their jackets like we do when it's too hot. Such scorching temperatures can hinder their growth and even kill them. Precipitation, or the amount of rainfall, is another key factor. Both too much and too little rainfall can be harmful. Droughts can cause crops to wither and die, while excessive rainfall can lead to flooding that drowns crops and promotes the spread of plant diseases. Now, let's not forget about our livestock. Animals, like crops,
also have optimal temperature ranges.
so changes in these conditions can lead to health issues affecting growth and reproduction. For instance, heat stress can reduce fertility in dairy cows and meat production in pigs. Changes in precipitation can also affect the availability of feed and water for livestock. So, as you can see, the relationship between climate change and agriculture is very direct and intertwined. Changes in temperature and precipitation due to climate change pose significant challenges to crop growth and livestock health, which in turn threaten our food security. This is why understanding this relationship is so vital. But don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom. In our upcoming topics, we'll explore how we can mitigate these impacts and ensure a sustainable and resilient food system for the future. Let's now move on to our next topic, the potential impact of climate change on global food security, focusing particularly on the increased risk of food shortages and price volatility. This is a big one, folks, so let's take a deep dive. Climate change and food security are intrinsically linked. Food security, just to clarify, is when all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to meet their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. But climate change, with its shifts in temperature, precipitation, and extreme weather events, threatens this. Here's why. As we mentioned, climate change impacts agricultural productivity. When crop yields are affected, it can lead to food shortages. This isn't just a problem for the areas directly hit by these climate changes. See, we live in an interconnected world. A decrease in crop yield in one place can affect food availability globally. Picture this. A severe drought hits the Midwest in the United States, a major agricultural hub. The corn and wheat yields decline significantly. These are staple foods, not only in the US, but also in many other countries that import these grains. So the drought doesn't just affect the US. It affects the global food supply. And it's not just about availability. It's also about affordability. When there's a shortage, the prices of these food items can skyrocket, making it more difficult for people, especially those in low-income communities, to afford the food they need. This price volatility can lead to social unrest and exacerbate issues of inequality. It's a domino effect. Moreover, with climate change expected to intensify in the coming years, these food shortages and price fluctuations could very well become more frequent and severe. But it's not all despair and devastation. Up next, we'll discuss the effects of extreme weather events, and importantly, how sustainable farming practices can help mitigate these impacts. So, hang in there. We're in this together. And together, we can tackle these challenges head on. All right, time to move on to our third topic, studying the effects of extreme weather events like floods, droughts, and storms on agricultural productivity and food supply chains. This is a critical area of concern when it comes to climate change and agriculture. So, let's get into it. Extreme weather events, which are increasing in frequency and intensity due to climate change, can have devastating effects on agriculture. Let's take a look at each of these in turn. Imagine a severe drought. Without sufficient water, crops can't grow effectively, leading to decreased yields. Livestock also suffer as they need water to survive and grass to graze, which also requires water to grow. A drought can thus lead to a reduction in both crop and livestock production. On the other hand, too much water can also be a problem. Picture a heavy flood washing away an entire season's crops in a matter of hours. Devastating, right? Floods can also drown livestock and cause the spread of various crop diseases. Then we have storms. High winds can damage crops and infrastructure, while excessive rain can waterlog fields. These events can lead to immediate losses in agricultural output, but they also have long-term effects. Soil erosion, for instance, can reduce the fertility of agricultural lands, affecting future yields. Now, these extreme weather events don't just affect agricultural productivity. They also disrupt food supply chains. For instance, floods and storms can damage roads and other infrastructure, making it difficult for farmers to get their produce to market. This can lead to food wastage, price increases, and even food shortages in some areas. So, as you can see, the effects of extreme weather events on agriculture and food supply chains are both profound and far-reaching. But don't lose hope just yet. Up next, we're going to talk about how sustainable and climate-resilient farming practices can help mitigate these impacts. So, stick around. This is a challenge, yes, but it's one that we can meet head-on with the right strategies and solutions. Next up on our agenda is a topic that's not only interesting, but also holds a lot of promise for our future: the role of sustainable and climate-resilient farming practices in mitigating the negative impacts of climate change on agriculture. To combat the challenges posed by climate change, it's essential that we adapt our agricultural practices. Being sustainable and resilient to climate is the key here. But what does that mean? Sustainable farming practices are methods that protect the environment, public health, human communities, and animal welfare. This includes reducing the use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides, improving water management, and preserving the biodiversity. Let's take crop rotation as an example. This age-old farming practice involves growing different types of crops in the same area in sequenced seasons. It not only improves soil health and fertility, but also helps manage pests and diseases, reducing the need for harmful pesticides. Climate-resilient farming practices, on the other hand, are strategies designed to help agricultural systems withstand and recover from the impacts of climate change. These can include using drought-resistant crop varieties, implementing water-efficient irrigation systems, and practicing agroforestry, where trees and crops are grown together to create a system that can better withstand climatic. These practices not only help protect our food supply in the face of climate change, but also come with additional benefits. They can improve soil health, increase biodiversity, and even contribute to climate change mitigation by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Now, I won't sugarcoat it. Transitioning to sustainable and climate-resilient farming practices isn't always easy. It can require significant changes in investment. But given the threats posed by climate change, it's a transition that we need to make. So that's our fourth topic.
Covered.
Up next, we're going to delve into the socioeconomic implications of climate change on agricultural communities, particularly in developing countries. Stay tuned because this is a critical piece of the puzzle when it comes to understanding the full impact of climate change on agriculture and food security. Now we're down to our final topic for today, examining the socioeconomic implications of climate change on agricultural communities. We're going to zoom in on developing countries, where a large portion of the population depends heavily on agriculture for their livelihood. Climate change doesn't just affect plants, animals, and the weather. It also affects people, especially those whose livelihoods are closely tied to the land. So, in many developing countries, a large proportion of the population relies on agriculture, making them particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Droughts, floods, and storms can wipe out a season's harvest, leaving farmers without the income they need to support their families. And it's not just about the loss of income. Farmers also face the loss of their homes, their land, and their way of life. These extreme weather events can also lead to higher food prices. This hits low-income households the hardest, as they spend a larger proportion of their income on food. And higher food prices mean these households have less to spend on other essentials like education and healthcare. Additionally, these challenges can lead to social and economic instability. When people's livelihoods are threatened, they may be forced to migrate to cities or other countries in search of work, leading to rapid urbanization and strains on already overburdened infrastructure and resources. But let's not forget, farmers aren't just victims of climate change. They're also part of the solution. By adopting sustainable and climate-resilient farming practices, they can help mitigate the impacts of climate change and ensure food security for their communities and the world at large. However, they often lack the resources and support to make these changes. That's why it's crucial that governments, NGOs, and the international community step in to provide the necessary assistance. So, as we've seen, the socioeconomic implications of climate change on agricultural communities, particularly in developing countries, are both significant and wide-ranging. But through resilience, adaptation, and support, these communities can navigate the challenges and continue to play their vital role in feeding our world. And with that, we've covered our final topic for today's session. Remember, understanding these issues is the first step towards addressing them. Climate change may be a daunting challenge, but together we can face it head on.